look for a long-term solution. An organisation in place. But there was an organisation that had all of the knowledge, that could do that, that had all of the knowledge and the infrastructure, and that was the United Nations. It was the United Nations Relief Works Agency, the refugee agency of the Palestinians. Israel completely sidelined it. So the Gaza Board of Peace is a failure, do you think?
I think you've really answered your question in the way that you've framed it, and I think that's absolutely correct. There was a workable infrastructure that could deliver the essentials with the professional proficiency, the reach, the partnership, the experience, and above all, the humanity, the fact that organizations present on the ground in Gaza, also in the West Bank, have those roots, those contacts with the community, means that they can respond with the sense of compassion, with the sense of humanity, to the people and their real needs, albeit with very limited resources under extreme duress. And what we have with the Board of Peace is essentially a vacuum. We have plans for more militarized forms of ration provision. We have plans for building a Riviera. This is a performance populist peace combined with a kleptocratic peace for profit formula. It is throwing away everything that we know has worked. This is everything that is founded on the basic principles with the kleptocratic, peaceful United Nations formula. It is throwing away everything that we know has worked. This is everything that is
going back into Gaza. You yourself, as I understand it, are not allowed to go back in to Gaza. Israel is restricting even volunteers getting in. The Board of Peace is clearly, as we've heard, isn't really doing the things it's supposed to be doing. You were nodding your head in agreement there when they were talking about the fact that there was a mechanism that allowed people like you in, and that's been destroyed. Just talk us about the effect on the medical professionals like you when you can't get in to help.
You're absolutely right. Look, my colleagues in Gaza are phenomenal doctors, physicians, nurses, and so on.
1 साल का होते ही इसकी शरारतें और भी बढ़ती जा रही हैं। लेकिन इस सब में इसकी हिफाजत और सही ग्रोथ मेरे लिए सबसे ज्यादा अहम है।
नेस्ले रिसर्च सेंटर स्विट्जरलैंड ने 1 से 3 साल के बच्चों के लिए स्पेशली डिजाइन किया नेस्ले नीडो 1+, जिसमें मौजूद इजाफी न्यूट्रिएंट्स जो बच्चों की इम्यूनिटी, पेट के डिफेंसेस, बोन्स और मसल्स की डेवलपमेंट को सपोर्ट करें।
इसीलिए तुम्हारी हर बढ़ते कदम पर नीडो और मेरा प्यार हर पल साथ फ्रॉम नेस्ले।
Shaving used to be a ritual, one style, one goal, clean, uniform, no questions asked. But times have changed. Grooming has evolved. Today, it's not just about shaving, it's about defining who you are. Your face is your canvas, and every line tells your story. Because shaving isn't about blending in, it's about standing out. Genesis, for every man's journey.
Outside for fellowship training, pick up skills that otherwise other surgeons would have access to. And there's, in addition to that, of course, I have a limitation on technology and healthcare and so on. And so, although they're talented surgeons, there are certain areas or areas of expertise that are missing there. And they are reliant upon colleagues from the outside coming in and not only performing surgeries there, but also trying to fill the gap in the training that they've been denied. And as a result, lots of people simply don't have access to the usual sort of healthcare people would around the world. In addition to that, you have to remember you're dealing with the most complex and severe injuries on the face of this earth. And I'm telling you this firsthand because I was involved in a medical evacuation program where we took out the most complex cases to neighboring countries, and we were treating them there, and that involved a multidisciplinary team from the globe to arrive at at decisions in the patient's best interest. And so when they deny us, they're basically not only cutting off a lifeline to the doctors there in terms of training, they're denying patients, their right, innocent people, their right to healthcare. And this is, of course, all orchestrated. It's a strangulation process. They don't want the people of Gaza to be there anymore. This is we are on a phase of genocide. And of course, they're not going to allow people like me. Me coming on the show, for example, means that I don't have access to Gaza anymore. Anyone who's outspoken, anyone who describes the suffering, they ban you.
Alex, how much of what you've just heard Dr. Mohammed talk about constitutes a war crime?
It's worse than a war crime. I mean, this is the crime that it's a crime of extermination. It's a crime of genocide, but it's something more. It's a crime against humanity in the most profound sense, that it is trying to kill the humanity of a people, and the sense of trauma that these people who have survived this will have for the rest of their lives. The extent to which the basic social fabric that makes us more than simple animals has been destroyed is deeply profound. And let me just add one sort of detail to this, which is that when we think of the number of people who are suffering from physical and mental disabilities as a result of this, just the number of child amputees is a very, very straightforward, visible, tangible example. How are these young children going to be able to become food secure themselves? How are they going to have livelihoods? How are they going to earn money? How are they going to be able to provide for families in future? The level of vulnerability to destitution, to food insecurity, to hunger is so much higher as a result of this onslaught.
Javier, one of the words that's always used for the Palestinians, whether it's in the occupied West Bank, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's abroad, is resilience. The Palestinians, we are used to this. We will, resist in our own little ways. And there is a certain amount of that is true. But I'm speaking to people now, and everybody is getting much more and more frustrated at this idea that the world's ignoring us because we've been through it since 1948. So everybody's just used to it. You've got to, how would you kind of combat that if you were speaking to somebody from, say, the UN, who was like, maybe we should give them some money, but maybe not. They've been going through this for far too long.
Imran, I think we should not romanticize resilience. We should be very proud of Palestinian resilience since 1948. However, this is not how a people should be living. We are in a constant state of struggling. I mean, today, people are celebrating Easter, to give an example. And even in order to get to a church, people have to actually fight for their right. Even praying has become an act of resistance under Israeli occupation, not to talk, of course, about Al-Aqsa Mosque being closed during most of the holy month of Ramadan. So in other words, when we talk about Palestinian resilience, I think it involves all aspects of Palestinian life, but people should not get used to it. People should get to act in order for Palestinians to be able to enjoy their rights. And here, I think, Imran, what's extremely important is, as we've been talking in this program, is to make clear that what's happening with Palestinians, it's not just a situation between Israel and Palestine, but it has an international responsibility element that's not being met as we speak.
Alex, one of the things about attention, global attention, when it comes to a particular genocide like Gaza, is that you get money. Donor step forward. It's a thing that it pushes, that publicity almost pushes somebody to do something. But when the spotlight disappears, that money also disappears, right?
That's correct. And we have the 1-2 terrible punch. Not only is the publicity vanishing, and therefore the public funding, but also aid budgets are being cut, and not just in the United States. I mean, the United Kingdom is now giving a lower proportion of its GDP per capita as international aid than at any time in the last 60 years. And that is absolutely shocking. The funds for this are drying up. And people are being left on their own. And however resilient, however steadfast they are, there comes a point at which human life simply cannot be sustained under this pressure.
I want to thank our guests, Alex Dewall, Javier Abu Eid, and Dr. Mohammed Tahir. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. That's it from me, Imran Khan, and the team here in Doha. Stay with us for more coverage of the war between the US, Israel, and Iran. Coming up in just a moment.
This is America, with Al Jazeera's exclusive interview with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
What are your main demands?
The Iranian regime can never have nuclear weapons.
The Iranian regime is able to take a lot of pain.
What's worse than having no off-ramp? Having no allies.
NATO has done absolutely nothing.
This sound and that sight have become the new normal across the Gulf.
This is America, every weekday on Al Jazeera.
Hard-hitting interviews.
Aren't you afraid that you might be one of the targets?
Anyone could become a target. We have seen that they have no hesitation about targeting any place.
Facing realities.
Does Qatar still trust Iran enough to mediate?
Let's say that this aggression brings a benefit for no one.
Thought-provoking answers.
How many have been displaced inside Iran?
I've heard 3 million. It could be more.
Hear their story on Talk to Al Jazeera.
Can you really bomb a political future into existence?
I don't think that's what we're trying to do. I think the objective here is to destroy the instruments of Iranian state power.
Upfront tackles the big issues only on Al Jazeera.
I'm Foliba Thibault. I'm a presenter. I've always wanted to be a journalist because I'm a very inquisitive person. And a pivotal moment was when I did an internship, a show that sought to reunite families separated by conflict in Sierra Leone and Liberia. That's when I realized that we as journalists could make a difference in people's lives. And here at Al Jazeera, we try to make a difference. We make sure their stories are told and their voices are heard.
This is Al Jazeera with our continuing coverage of the war between the US, Israel, and Iran. I'm Rob Matheson. Coming up, Donald Trump lays down more deadlines, telling Tehran to open the Strait of Hormuz by Tuesday, or he'll bomb power plants, bridges, and, quote, unleash hell on Iran.
In case Iran's infrastructure is attacked, we would react in kind.
Iran says it's ready to retaliate if Trump follows through, even as airstrikes continue across the country. An apartment block in Israel is hit by a projectile. At least 10 people are injured, one critically. U.S. troops rescue a second airman in a high-stakes mission in Iran 2 days after his fighter jet went down. An Israeli strike on Beirut kills at least 4 people, including a teenage girl. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to unleash the might of the U.S. military on Iran to get the Strait of Hormuz reopened. He set a fast-approaching deadline for it to reopen the waterway, promising to attack civilian sites if it remains shut. Now, in the past hour, he simply posted the day and the time, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Earlier, Trump posted that Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one, in Iran. He went on, there will be nothing like it. Trump then uses an expletive demanding that the strait should be opened, saying otherwise Iranians will be living in hell. But Tehran has warned it will retaliate. Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmaili Baghei says any U.S.-related location in the Middle East would be a target.
Our armed forces have made it clear that in case Iran's infrastructure is attacked, we would react in kind. Our armed forces would target any similar infrastructure that is owned or in any way or manner related to the United States or contributes to their act of aggression against Iran.
Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf has also responded to Trump, saying, your reckless moves are dragging the United States into a living hell for every single family. And our whole region is going to burn because you insist on following Netanyahu's commands. Make no mistake, you won't gain anything through war crimes. Now, Ali Hashim is live in the Iranian capital for us. First of all, I want to bring in Mike Hanna, who's in Washington, D.C. Mike's Trump's post about the strait using strong language and upping the threat level.
Yes, indeed. Well, a remarkable message coming from a head of state at a time when his country is at war with another nation. Using an expletive within that social media message is perhaps an indication of the president's frustration with the fact that he's not getting what he wants, and that is complete Iranian surrender to whatever demands he is making. But interestingly enough as well, in recent days, he said the Strait of Hormuz does not concern the U.S. because it does not rely on oil coming through that strait, saying that it's the countries who use that oil or rely on that oil who should sort out the problem with Iran and its closure of the strait. Well, that is changed completely in the course of today, where he has made the opening the Strait of Hormuz one of the central tenets of his demands from Iran. So on the one hand here, you're having something that didn't matter a few days ago. Now it is absolutely central and threatening once again in the strongest of terms that if Iran does not meet his demands, then he's simply going to blow everything up and take the oil. It's his words.
Mike, there is a different side to this, though, isn't there? Because you were talking about the strong language that he was using in the post on Truth Social. He's also been speaking to Fox News. His tone there has been very different. He was talking about negotiations.
Well, indeed, yes, but he's done it to a number of media organizations in the course of the morning. He spent the morning on his golf course and clearly spent a lot of time on the telephone to various U.S. news organizations. For example, he said to one that the war is going to be over in a couple of days, not a couple of weeks. He also said that negotiations are ongoing. He says some Iranian negotiators have been granted amnesty so they can continue to talk. Sources indicate that he's using his two close advisors, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, to conduct these negotiations, with whom is not clear, no confirmation as to the personnel involved. But he's saying, on the one hand, that he's going to bomb Iran if the demands are not met by 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. That's also a shifting target because the deadline expired on Monday, but he's now decided 8 o'clock Tuesday night is the time at which everything will ramp up, should he so wish. So there are conflicting messages coming from the US president. On the one hand, threatening to blow up everything, striking at civilian infrastructure. Many observers believe this would constitute a war crime. On the other hand, he's holding out a carrot of ongoing negotiation, indicating, in his view, that they are being successful and that they could conclude before that deadline of 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday.
Mike, thanks very much. Mike Hanna there in Washington, D.C. We're going to bring in Ali Hashim in Tehran. The Speaker of Iran's parliament accusing Donald Trump of committing war crimes. What else are the Iranians saying?
Well, the Iranians are repeating actually what they've been saying in the past. We've heard the spokesperson for the foreign ministry stressing that Iran is going to retaliate in case its plants, its electricity power plants are being hit. It's going to retaliate symmetrically towards American and American-affiliated industries. That would mean in the region. Now, we heard also the Speaker of the Parliament saying that President Trump's reckless decisions are driven by Netanyahu's advice, and that this is creating hell not only for the Americans but also for the region here. So it's the Iranians in a way or another are also raising the stake, and they are not giving up on this. They're not surrendering as President Trump is asking them. The Strait of Hormuz, once again, we've heard from the advisor or the communication director for the presidency that it's not going to be open except if Iran's conditions are met, and that Iran wants to get its compensation for the damage it had from the toll on the Strait of Hormuz.
Ali, I understand we're hearing more of attacks in Bushehr province, and of course that's where the Bushehr nuclear power plant is. Tell us more about the latest attacks in Iran.
Well, the latest attacks, let me read from this. We have an attack in Bushehr, as you said.
इसके स्कूल के चैलेंजेस बढ़ते ही जा रहे हैं, लेकिन इनमें इसका जीतना मेरे लिए सबसे ज्यादा अहम है। इस जीत को रोज पॉसिबल बनाए मेरा प्यार और नीडो स्कूल एज न्यूट्रिशन, जिसमें मौजूद इजाफी न्यूट्रिएंट्स इसकी ग्रोथ, लर्निंग और इम्यूनिटी को सपोर्ट करें। इसलिए तुम्हारे हर बढ़ते कदम पर नीडो और मेरा प्यार हर पल साथ। From Nestle.
With Udemy, there's a world of possibility at your fingertips. With one click, you're in the leading online marketplace for learning and skills. Want to become an AI expert? This is learning from real-world experts around the globe. Want to awaken your artistic side? This is learning your way. Want to switch professions? Help your team reskill? This is Udemy, the power of possibilities.
From Tehran. Alex Vatanka is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. He's also author of the book, The Battle of the Ayatollahs in Iran, the United States, Foreign Policy and Policy Rivalry. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Two very different messages, essentially, at least in tone, being sent by Donald Trump just in the last several hours. A very strong threat, strongly worded threats on social media. At the same time, he's talking about negotiations ongoing with Iran, granting amnesty to the Iranian negotiators. What is your assessment of how Iran is interpreting these messages that they're getting from Donald Trump?
It's great to be with you. Look, I think basically if I had to guess, and I am essentially guessing since I have sources in Iran, but I'm not underground in Iran, so I'm guessing what they are thinking in terms of the message from Donald Trump is actually not that dissimilar to what you kind of tend to hear here in Washington, D.C., that what the president is essentially expressing is not a new strategy or anything that looks like a coherent strategy, but essentially he's expressing his frustration about where he is right now in this war. He didn't want to be here. He's very frustrated. You hear this word, he's boxed himself in again and again in Washington, that the president doesn't know which way to go. He's, essentially confronting a bad set of options in terms of how he could escalate, whether it's going to be the military part or as we just heard, potential for sites, civilian infrastructure sites being hit and so forth. So frustration for sure is there. You can detect that. But other than that, in terms of a clear-cut strategy forward, that we're still waiting to see if that will emerge from this presidential White House.
We're seeing again this deadline as far as military action is concerned, or this threat of military action, now moving to 8 p.m. Tuesday Eastern time, Eastern U.S. time, I should say. Again, Trump bringing in this message about negotiations. Now, we don't really know a great deal about these negotiations. We don't know really who's involved with them, where they're being held, who's talking to who. Is there a possibility, nevertheless, going by what we have experienced in the past, when negotiations have been brought to light by Donald Trump, that this could be, again, Donald Trump trying to find his own off-ramp with this particular situation, in that he will then come out and say that negotiations are possibly moving at some speed, and therefore the delay, the threat of military action could be delayed again?
Yeah, no, as we've heard from, for example, the Iranian Speaker of the Parliament, the Majlis, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, others, they think the President of the United States is saying these things about, diplomatic track working and there is progress. He's saying that to reassure a very upset, essentially, American public opinion and a very nervous American market. That doesn't necessarily mean there are diplomatic talks happening. We know, of course, there are some efforts being carried out, whether it's the Egyptians, whether it's the Pakistanis, others are involved. But it's certainly, in terms of what we can detect from the outside, nothing that seems serious. And the war rages on, and the fact that the president is providing these ultimatums and talking about hitting more targets and so on, he seems to be on the path of escalation, which contradicts any idea of diplomacy. So at this point, I think it is probably not that unfair for us to assume that there is really not much of a diplomatic track that's alive right now. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. It could happen. We have to remember that the Iranian side can't stay in this war forever either. That they too, if they're given a credible off-ramp, might want to take it. I think they would. But clearly right now, they don't feel the American president's given them off-ramp. He's still asking for what he's asked for throughout this war, unconditional surrender, which, as we can tell, the Iranians are not ready to give him.
Yeah, they've described it in the past as a series of maximalist demands that he's been making. Is there a way, given what you were just saying about the position that Iran regards itself as being in, nevertheless, given the risks of escalation, particularly, of course, in the Gulf region itself, is there a way, do you think, that Iran would be able to de-escalate by making some changes in its own position without handing over what it would regard as its fundamental rights?
I would very quickly point to a historical precedent here that is actually pretty relevant. During the Iran-Iraq war, the Iranians for a long time, in fact for 8 years, kind of refused a ceasefire because they said they were going to bring Saddam Hussein down. And for 8 years they insisted, at a huge cost for the country of Iran. Hundreds of thousands of people dead and billions in damages. I sometimes get a sense, listening to some of the language coming out of Tehran, including the sort of posts that we see from Ghalibaf on social media, as sort of expressions that I interpret as overconfidence. So I hope that's not where Iran is going, because this kind of overconfidence, when you're dealing with someone like Donald Trump, can quickly go further south than we already are. But look, so much depends on what the U.S. does. The president of this country, United States, has given himself the option to pull out of this war tomorrow. If he does, then Iran has to then look at its own Gulf neighbors, particularly to see if there's a way to reduce tensions. Now, again, you're talking about maximalist demands that Iran and the United States have put against one another. Iran, in some ways, have also put some maximalist demands towards the Gulf states. But again, if you soften your position and you accept the basic reality that it's not just Iran that's hurting, the Gulf states are hurting, and if the United States kind of parks itself out and says this is no longer my war, then, the logic would perhaps tell us that there should be a way for these countries that are going to be neighbors regardless when this war ends to look for a way out, to reassure each other, particularly if the United States decide that it's had enough and it's walking away.
It's really interesting to get your thoughts on this. Alice Vatanka, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, the threat of escalation in Iran puts the Gulf region squarely in the crossfire. The sites Iran is threatening to hit back at are almost entirely located in GCC countries, which are already coping with daily attacks. Russell Sadr is live for us in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. So Gulf countries already under attack today, possibly preparing for an escalation if Trump follows through in his threats.
Indeed, their facilities here, particularly the energy facilities, have been hit again and again. We're talking about the power stations, the electricity facilities, the desalination plants, the gas fields, the gas facilities, the transport terminals, and many more. However, so far, still the consideration here, the assessment here is that this has not reached to an existential level. So, and of course, if the Americans go on with their threats, so they're expecting that Iran is going to expand the scale of the attacks, the scope of the attacks. So far, what we have seen, Ras Tanura, one of the largest, the largest energy facility in the east of the country, in east of Saudi Arabia, was attacked. The Yanbu energy facilities were attacked in the western part of Saudi Arabia. Then Ras Laffan in Qatar, the Ras Laffan gas facility is not only the largest in Qatar, but globally also is the biggest one. And then Habshan gas facility in the United Arab Emirates. So according to reports, at least 6 largest gas facilities and oil refineries are already attacked, and in many cases they have lost the operational capacity. Some of them will take up to 5 years to be fully recovered. But here, as I said, still the assessment in the GCC is that it's not an existential level, and that's why their response was more defensive rather than offensive, and they're trying to mobilize the international community. However, if the assessment here changed, that this is now becoming an existential threat to their economy, to their social stability, then this defensive posture stance could change into an offensive, or let's say at least to a retaliatory stance.
Russell, let's talk about the situation with the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is insisting the Strait of Hormuz is open and that it's been holding meetings with Oman today on how best to manage it. What's come out of that?
Well, so far, we just know the confirmation that there have been meetings at the deputy minister levels between the two countries. However, here, I think one thing must be clear. So it is Iranians that are talking about a protocol, a new regime of the passage of the vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, while Omanis are talking about how to secure the smooth passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So when you look at the statement that's coming from the Sultanate of Oman, it's saying that the experts from both sides, they met, and so simply they have discussed, the experts discussed, and they have put forward a number of visions and proposals regarding to ensure the safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. They're not talking about changing the status of the Strait of Hormuz. They're not changing the protocols, the international conventions here. But it's Iranians that are clearly saying that there has to be a new regime, and there will be the toll fees on the ships that are getting in and out. However, here, two things are quite important. It's not only up to Iran and the Sultanate of Oman to decide about it. What about the American positions? And also, more importantly, what about the GCC? Because 20% of the global crude oil and 20% of the global LNG is passing on through this Strait of Hormuz, and majority of them is being imported from the GCC countries. GCC countries saying that there will be no change in the Strait of Hormuz, and the status quo is going to remain the same, and they're saying that this is unacceptable. So that's why, as of now, there are talks, but still nothing concrete has come out of that talks.
Russell, thank you very much indeed. Russell Sadr there talking to us from the Saudi capital, Riyadh. Well, the Strait of Hormuz has emerged as a focal point for the conflict with Iran. As we've been reporting, President Trump has threatened to attack Iran's civilian infrastructure if the waterway isn't reopened by Tuesday. But Tehran says it's already open, only to friendly nations. Now, since February 28th, traffic has collapsed at times, dropping to just 1 or 2 ships per day compared to about 150 a day before the war. The few vessels that pass are tightly controlled, with reports that they're being charged toll fees in the millions. They're mostly carrying crude oil, liquefied gas, and essential goods. Emma Salisbury is a maritime specialist, and she's a senior fellow with the National Security Programme at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. She's joining us from London. Thank you so much for being with us. Donald Trump says that he wants the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened. Iran says it is open. It's just not open to the US and some of its allies. What's your reading of the situation currently?
Well, essentially what's happening at the moment is Iran is using its leverage, and the leverage it has is the Strait of Hormuz, and it has absolutely no incentive to do otherwise as things currently stand. So Iran has essentially full control over passage through the strait at the moment. So it is taking advantage of that to charge commercial shipping a toll fee to be able to get through safely, because it knows that it can do so. So this means that ships are passing through, but they are only doing so, as you said, if they pay a fee. So this means that traffic through the strait has gone way, way down, because if those ships do not pay that fee, then they have no guarantee of safe passage whatsoever.
We're talking just a moment ago about these negotiations apparently that are going on between Iran and Oman with regard to the Strait of Hormuz. What's your assessment of that? Is that a step forward, do you think, to trying to find some way of allowing more shipping through?
I think that those talks will only lead to Iran trying to formalise its toll arrangement through the strait. Given the state of the war at the moment and given President Trump's threats, Iran currently has no incentive to do anything else other than what it's doing at the moment. So it sounds to me, from what I've read of those talks, that what Iran is trying to do is have some kind of formal agreement in place and a formal structure that will enable it to charge those fees to commercial ships that want to pass in and out of the Gulf.
So Donald Trump is demanding that the Strait of Hormuz has to be reopened by, his deadline is Tuesday 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's easy to say that the strait should be open, but just how complex an operation would that be?
Well, if the Iranians don't want to reopen the strait, the only option is for the US to open it itself. The way to do that essentially is to organise convoys. And this is something that happened during the tanker war, during the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s. So essentially you would have one or more commercial ships, and you would have American warships protecting them against drone and missile strikes from the Iranians. But to be able to get the traffic anywhere back near where it needs to be for there to be less of an economic shock, you would need to have a lot of surface warships available. And I'm sceptical that the US Navy has enough available to be able to do that properly. The other threat is naval mines. There has been some reporting that Iran has laid mines in the strait. It does have a stockpile of several thousand naval mines that it could very easily lay more if it wanted to. And this means that if you wanted to clear the strait, you would need minesweeping ships. And the US Navy simply does not have enough of minesweeping capabilities to be able to clear the Strait of Hormuz of naval mines. So for the US to be able to reopen the strait, that is an incredibly difficult, time-consuming and costly thing to do.
It's not just a question, is it, of shipping companies paying apparently millions of dollars to Iran in order to have their ships be allowed through. It's also about the insurance that is attached to both the ships and the contents of the cargo that they're carrying as well. How does the insurance work in terms of this?
So it's essentially the same process as your home insurance or any other insurance. So the insurance underwriters for the company will look at the risk to a particular voyage that your ship is taking and look at the value of the cargo and the other factors and mix those all together and come up with a figure to insure that voyage. The problem with coming through the Strait of Hormuz is that risk has skyrocketed. So your ship is at risk of being hit by a drone or by a missile or indeed hitting a naval mine. So that means that insurance underwriters are assessing the risk as being so high that the insurance premium to cover those voyages is astronomical. And that means that it is not worth it for many of these companies to take that voyage because the insurance premium may be more money than they would actually make in profit off that run. So this means that essentially Iran has been able to stop shipping coming through the Strait of Hormuz by having that risk get so high that those companies cannot afford that insurance.
Is it a way of replacing that insurance, that commercial insurance? Is there another system that you think might be brought in, at least in the short term, to guarantee that there is safe path through the Strait of Hormuz for shipping?
So the only way that would be able to get around using commercial insurance would be essentially to use state insurance, which would mean the United States underwriting those voyages. So the United States would have to agree to pay the cost of any ships that are damaged, destroyed, any cargoes that are lost by those crews taking those ships through the Strait of Hormuz. This is an option that I've heard talked about, but the thing is, it is extremely expensive. And I don't know whether the United States would be willing to commit that kind of money, especially if Iran then takes the opportunity to hit all of those ships, because Iran will then know that doing so will be directly costing the Trump administration money.
Really appreciate you giving us your time. Emma Salisbury, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
A U.S. airman has been rescued in Iran after an intense 48-hour search operation.
The
weapons systems officer had been missing since Friday when the fighter jet they were in went down in the Kogiloya and Boya Ahmad province. Tehran said it shot down the F-15E. It's a two-seater aircraft, and the pilot was rescued shortly afterwards. John Hendren reports from Washington, D.C.
It was a daring and risky mission to save an American airman from becoming an Iranian prisoner of war. Iranian forces searched the mountainous areas of southwestern Iran after an F-15E fighter jet went down on Friday. It was the first time a U.S. aircraft had crashed in hostile territory in the 5-week-old war. Two Black Hawk helicopters took fire as U.S. teams raced to find the missing crew member. An A-10 Warthog, an air support aircraft, was also damaged, its pilot ejecting over the Gulf. Iran broadcast photos of what it said was debris from the fighter jet, including a jump seat. Although the pilot had been rescued on Friday, the weapons specialist remained in hiding, evading Iranian forces for 2 days. Finally, early on Sunday, deep in Iranian territory, the U.S. search operation was successful. President Donald Trump made the announcement on social media, posting, "We got him," saying the colonel had been behind enemy lines in the treacherous mountains of Iran being hunted by our enemies. He said U.S. forces had been monitoring his location 24 hours a day and sent dozens of aircraft armed with the most lethal weapons in the world to retrieve him. Trump added he sustained injuries, but he will be just fine. A U.S. official told Al Jazeera the rescue operation began in darkness